Yeah, what's poppin', everybody? Welcome to the FNB App Academy. This is the second episode, and I am your host, Karabo Mohola. Always thrilled to be walking this beautiful journey with you guys. If we talk about the FNB App Academy, this is the perfect place to get you guys started on building that winning app of yours. And obviously, I'll be part of this 9-week digital journey that is all about unlocking your tech genius, but also leveling up on your digital skills and preparing you guys for future of innovation and entrepreneurship. As I said, I am Karabo Mohola. I'm always thrilled to be walking this beautiful journey with you. All right, so please do make sure that you guys are active on social media platforms. Don't forget to hashtag FNB Academy. Please do stay and remain active, and you guys can win some amazing prizes that are up for grabs. And of course, just to give you guys a reminder of the previous lesson where we guys took you through the orientation and the learning management system. So you guys must bear in mind that all lessons are recorded. So if you guys missed the previous lesson, you guys have an opportunity to refer back to the learning management system and catch up on the previous session. I am truly excited for what today has in store for all of us that are part of the FNB App Academy. Let us take a look at a video with Simpiwe Radebe as we catch up with him.
I'm Simpiwe Radebe. I'm 20 years old and I come from Elands Park, Johannesburg. Having a passion for programming, I started making apps when I was 14, pushing, learning on my own. YouTube was the best teacher for me. And then I entered the App Academy. So they said App Academy, you learn how to do an app and then you join into the hackathon where it get entered into App of the Year. So that really pushed me to actually attend, learn some things that I don't know since I'm self-taught. App Academy also taught you different things that you didn't actually see on YouTube. They were more in-depth with different topics in creating an app, from business to design to the actual coding of the app. Right now I'm an Android developer and I do full stack development. So from websites to web applications to cloud. Attend App Academy. App Academy does teach you a lot. They also do make sure they teach with the latest technologies. So I'd say go for it. Just be passionate and push yourself because you can definitely do it.
Wow, awesome stuff from Simpiwe. Always exciting just to hear his story of how he got himself involved in the beautiful app of the year. Now, that was it from Simpiwe. Now, let us take a look at some of you guys as you guys remain active on socials. So please don't forget to hashtag FNB Academy. Remain active on socials. You guys can stand a chance to win some awesome prizes. Right now, let's take a look at your guys' engagement on social.
What excites me most about the FNB Academy is the opportunity to collaborate with like-minded individuals, learn from experts, apply my skills to real-world challenges.
This is an opportunity that will assist me on improving my coding and programming skills, which is a very important aspect in the course that I'm doing.
I'm looking forward to sharpening my Java skills, creating innovative applications that solve real-life problems, learning more about full-stack development.
I'm looking forward to innovate. I'm looking forward to contribute to the future of technology with the FNB App Academy.
All right, awesome stuff, man. It's always amazing to see you guys remain engaging on our socials, remain active, engage with us. Let us know what each lesson has taught you, and also please remain consistent on the social media platforms. That was it by taking a look at you guys being engaged on the platform. But now we're going to transition to our very next lesson as we have Talaha in studio. All right, so awesome stuff, guys. Right now, I'm joined by Talaha, the General Manager at IT Varsity. Talaha will be taking us through strategies to look forward to before developing your apps. Talaha, how are you, brother, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much for being part of this beautiful program.
Oh, it's
also
great
being
to
right
be here.
in studio. First and foremost, let us know who Talaha is and where do you come from?
Cool. So I'm born and raised in Durban. It was a a bit of a journey
Yeah,
to come here today, but entirely worth it for the App Academy just to be a part of this this event. Yeah, I am the general manager at IT Varsity. I have been in the EdTech space for about 6 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, so what was that? 2018, 2019. So it's been a journey.
Beautiful, man. So let's talk about the importance of, the App Academy. What does it mean for, obviously beginners, advanced, and intermediate developers to be part of the App Academy?
Oh, I mean, I am just so thrilled that we are part of it because of what it means. I mean, this event on this scale is not something that is very common, and it's not something that's been around very long. I mean, I wish when I was studying there were such opportunities around, but there simply wasn't. You know, you were, for the most part of it, you were alone, just with the people in your immediate area, and that was it. But now, you know, with the App Academy, there's tens of thousands of people, and apart from the lessons, you get an opportunity to network with all of these guys, and the potential for growth just alone there is insane. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's a privilege to be here myself, and I am just so glad that all of these students get to be a part of it as well.
Listen, Talha, awesome stuff. Thank you so much for joining us and for being part of the App Academy. Talha said it, he wishes that there was more opportunities and platforms like this the past couple of years, and you guys have the privilege of utilizing mentors and facilitators and getting as much knowledge from them to help you guys build that amazing app of yours. Talha, without any further ado, please take us through strategies for you guys to look forward to before building those beautiful apps. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Right, so as Karabo said, today we're going to be talking about app strategies, right? So these are the decisions that you need to make as a developer before you start coding. Before you write a single line of code, there are things that you need to consider, right? So it's important to think about an app as a business, especially if you are looking to get into development, to be an entrepreneur, right? To have your app be a source of revenue for you. You need to consider that that app is now your business. And just like every business, there's important decisions you need to consider, right? So today we're going to be going through some of those, and we're going to go through the logic you can use to answer some of these questions, and that's going to set you up and put you in a much better place for success as a developer, and it's going to ensure that your apps that you put out into the world have a much greater chance of success. So before we get into those, the very first decision you need to make is on the development paradigm that you're going to be using. Now, what I mean by this is it's either going to be a native or a cross-platform app, right? And this is a decision you're going to have to make. So when we're talking about development paradigms, right, there's generally three. You have your native apps, you have your mobile web apps, and you have your hybrid apps, right? So in the first part of the lesson, I'm going to go through each of these, and I'm going to break down what it means, what each of these means, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of each of these. And that's going to help you to then decide for yourself which is right for you for the specific app that you are working on or intend to build. So first things first, right? Let's talk about native, right? Native apps. A native app is an app that is built in the native language of the device, right? So the manufacturers of a device and the device operating system have a native language, right? A language that it can easily understand without much translation, right? So for example, in Android, the native language is Java. And if you want to develop for iOS, so if you're developing an app for an iPhone or iPad, on any other iOS device, you will have to use Swift, right? Before it used to be Objective-C, if I remember correctly, but now Swift is the native language of iOS. So this app, in essence, is built in the same language, or in the native language, rather, of the operating system. So the operating system understands it right off the bat with no need for translation or conversion. It integrates directly with the operating system itself. Next, you have your mobile web apps, right? So these, as the name suggests, are web-based apps. So development-wise, it's most likely going to be a web-based technology or a web technology. And the most commonly used are your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, most commonly abbreviated to HTML5. The nice thing about web apps is that you can bring in other technologies and other languages to fill in gaps here and there, but at the very base level, it's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it's deployed through the web. And the final app type that you have is your hybrid apps. So as the name suggests, these sit somewhere in between your native apps and your mobile web apps. Now, back in the day, even 7 or 8 years ago, there wasn't many options in terms of hybrid development frameworks, but today there are numerous. And unlike with native or with mobile web apps, there isn't just one language or one set of languages that you use. Rather, the language you use, the development language you use, the programming language is going to depend on the framework you're using. So there are numerous frameworks available, and each framework has its own language. And so you will develop your app in that language and have the hybrid, the framework translate your app for the OS that you want to deploy onto. And that's why it's called a hybrid, because it isn't exactly native, but it does a good job of pretending to be native. And in all intents and purposes, it works and performs exactly like a native app. So here are some of the frameworks that you have available. As you can see, there are frameworks now available for just about all of the most common programming languages. Some languages have multiple frameworks, so you have a lot of choices to work from. Obviously, in the App Academy, we are working on the second of these, which is React, and the language of React is JavaScript. Although we'll get into the details of these a little bit later, there are some differences here and there. So it's not exactly JavaScript, or it's not going to be exactly Java, but for the most part, it's going to be the same. Now, let's look at how each of these paradigms work, each of these development paradigms work, right? When you have your native apps, you'll have your operating system. Every single app needs to run on an operating system. There has to be a device that you are deploying your app to. So always the operating system will be first. And with a native app, you're then going to have your app sit directly on top of the operating system. There's nothing in between. The native app, because it's built in the native language of the operating system, it integrates directly, seamlessly with the operating system. So it's pretty straightforward, and once you deploy it onto your device, you are good to go. Now, when it comes to mobile web apps, right, again, you're going to have the operating system of the device you are deploying to. But on top of that, you're going to have the browser. Again, as the name suggests, these are web-based applications. And then on top of the browser, you're going to have your app. So the browser is the host for your app. Your app is running within the browser, and the browser is displayed on your operating system. So that's the thing about mobile web apps. They are entirely browser-based, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but there are some advantages and disadvantages to that. And then you have your hybrid apps. So again, you have your operating system, but then instead of the browser, you have a bridging technology. So the bridging technology is going to be the framework you are using to develop your app, which in our case is React. And on top of the framework, there will be your app, right? So your app is built on the framework. Your code will integrate with this framework, with the bridge, right? In whatever language the framework understands. The framework then does the work of translating your code into a format that the operating system is going to understand, and the framework then integrates with the operating system. So the bridge, think about it as a translator of sorts, right? Or think about it as a middleman between your code and the device's operating system. Remember, the code that you're writing with a framework isn't the native language of the operating system. So it isn't going to understand it right off the bat. That's why the framework is there. The framework does the work of converting it into a language that the operating system can understand. And the beauty about this is that you can develop your app once, right? Whether you want to deploy it on 1, 2, or 10 different operating systems, the process is going to stay the same, right? You develop your app once, and then you have the framework do the work of translating it and converting it into a format that's usable by the operating systems of all of these devices. So let's look at these side by side, and let's discuss some of the advantages and disadvantages of each. If you want, you can save this slide, and every time you are about to undertake a new project, a new development project, go through this, and it'll help you decide which of these you are going to use, whether you're going to go native, whether you're going to go with a mobile app, and whether you're going to go with a hybrid. So firstly, right, looking at the native apps, the advantages, it's highly, highly graphical. Remember, it's built on the native language, and not just the native language, but it has, because you are developing within the native language, you're going to be using the native APIs and the native resources available for those devices. So it's going to be highly graphical. It's going to look like your app belongs on that device. So, you know, when you just buy an iPhone and you have some apps that came from Apple, that are installed on your device already, those apps have a look and feel. They look and feel like they belong on that device. So when you develop a native app, you are using those same techniques. So your app is going to look and feel like it belongs on that device, which, you know, it adds another layer to the term native app, right? It simply, it integrates 100%, not just technically, but visually as well. The other advantage is App Store distribution. Naturally, your app is going to be, it can be uploaded and downloaded from the App Store of the device. And thirdly, you have full device integration, which again means your app connects directly to the device's operating system, so you have access to all of the device's local APIs. So if your app needs to access the local storage of the device, or the location settings, or, you know, any other of the device settings, it needs to use the camera, those APIs are open to you right out of the gate. So it makes it very, very simple to integrate those features into your apps. But now, the disadvantages of having a native app. First and foremost, there is zero portability, meaning the device or the platform you develop your app for, that's it. That's where it's going to live. So if you develop an app for Android, that app can only be deployed on an Android device, right? Because of the level of integration between the native APIs that you're using in your app and the operating system. It simply cannot be ported over to an iOS device. So that's the major drawback of native applications. The second disadvantage is platform instability. So if there is a major update on the platform, on the device's operating system, you are going to have to keep up with that and release updates accordingly. If you don't, your apps are going to be outdated. They are not going to meet the regulations set by your Apples or your Androids, and it could be pulled from the App Store. So you're going to have to stay on your game with making sure that your apps stay up to date. The next disadvantages of native apps is the development cost and the development time. Now remember, if you're developing a native app, there's no porting over from one platform to the other. So you're going to have multiple apps for each platform. You're going to have one app for iOS, one app for Android, and one app for any other platforms that you want to deploy to. But let's, for simplicity's sake, keep it to just iOS and Android. You're going to have two different teams who are familiar with Java and who are familiar with Swift to develop and maintain those apps, right? Because although it's to you, it's the same app, but as far as the devices are concerned, those are two completely different apps. And any change you make on one, you're going to have to make sure the team on the other side makes as well. So the development time, the development costs all shoot up because of that, and maintenance as well, right? So once you upload an app onto the App Store, it's not a done deal. Even the most simplest of apps are going to need some level of maintenance. Now you're going to have to keep these highly specialized teams around to maintain these native apps. And then finally, you have limited control of the app because it's built to integrate with the device's APIs. There's not, you don't have an entire level of freedom of what you can do with the app. Now, moving on to web apps, right? The first advantage is that they are future-proof, right? HTML, CSS, JavaScript, your HTML5 family of languages, they're not really going away anytime soon. There are updates that come once in a while, but for the most part, they are not anything where you're going to have to go and rewrite sections of code to stay up to date. It generally remains the way you develop it. The second advantage, and this is one of the biggest advantages of mobile web apps over native apps, is that it's completely cross-platform, meaning you develop it once and you can run it on virtually any device because it's based on a browser. It's web-based. If your device has a browser, meaning it can access the internet, it can run your app. There's zero further requirements. It also has low development costs because the languages used are very simple, and you don't have to develop multiple versions of the app. You're developing one and deploying everywhere. Maintenance is also relatively simple compared to your native apps. Updates are instantaneous. Right? That's another major benefit because it's web-based, it's living on the internet. So anytime you need to make an update, all you have to do is push it to the server that it is hosted on, and anyone using the app automatically gets an update. And it'll be live on their devices. There's no need to go and download an update or schedule an update from the App Store because it's web-based, it's instant. And the final advantage or major advantage of web-based applications is that you have complete freedom of what this app can do. You can code in just about any functionality you need. The only limit really is your skills and your resources that you have available to you. Other than that, the sky is the limit. But on to the disadvantages, right? Mobile is sounding a little bit too good to be true, but there are some drawbacks and reasons you should consider either native or hybrid over mobile web apps. And the first and the most significant of those disadvantages is you have almost zero device integration at all, right? Your app, for all intents and purposes, doesn't even know what device it is running on, right? All it knows is that it lives on a browser. It's a web app, right? So it has no way of accessing the device's local APIs, the local storage, or anything of that sort at all. Which is something to consider. If you have an app in mind that does require some of those features, then most likely mobile web app isn't the way to go for you. And the final drawback of mobile web apps over native apps is that the graphics are very, very limited. The graphics that you can include in a web app is basically going to be what you put into it. Unlike with a native, where you are using the same assets, the same graphics of the native platform. So if you're developing for iOS, you're going to be using iOS's native icons and buttons. But on a web app, you don't have access to those. So you're going to have to design those graphics yourself. And you can get it to look like a native app, but it's very, very manual. You're going to have to get all of those native looking elements yourself and then upload them and incorporate them into your app. And if there's a major update where the graphics of your device changes, you're not going to get those updates automatically. You're going to have to do the manual process of reincorporating, redesigning those elements, unless you're working with a framework of sorts, right? But that's now getting a little bit towards hybrid development. Now moving over to hybrid, right? And you'll notice that as we go through this list, a hybrid kind of sits in the middle of these two in terms of advantages versus disadvantages. So first thing to note about your hybrid apps is that they look and feel like a native app, right? In fact, if you put the two side by side in front of a layman, they're not going to be able to tell the difference. Even a professional developer, depending on the type of app it is, won't be able to tell which is native and which is the hybrid without looking at the code first. That's the beauty of hybrid apps, and that's how far hybrid apps have come. But unlike with native, it doesn't have the same costs associated with it, and it doesn't have the same time requirements related to it, because you're developing once and then you're deploying across all of your devices. Then, just like with your native apps, your hybrid apps have App Store distribution. So they can be hosted on the App Stores across your devices, and they can be downloaded by users directly from the App Store, which is an advantage that hybrid apps have over your mobile web apps. The third advantage of your hybrid apps is, just like native apps, they have full device integration. They can talk directly to the device's operating system. So again, if you need to access local storage or location or weather or the camera, you can access those APIs from the framework, but you don't have to code in the native language of the device, because the framework you're using does that work for you. You'll just tell your framework, for example, I'm trying to open the camera. Then depending on which platform you are porting your app to, the framework will know how to contact the operating system's API that handles the camera and unlock that feature for your app and for your users. So that is the advantage of of hybrid apps. And unlike native, you don't have to write in multiple languages. It's one and done, and you can distribute it on just about any device out there. Some of the drawbacks of your hybrid apps is there are limitations in terms of the graphics, but it mostly depends on the type or the specific framework you use. I included it here just so you are aware of it, but hybrid frameworks have really come a long way. And for most use cases, there is virtually no difference now between a native app and a hybrid app in terms of visuals. So just look into the specifics of the framework you're using. For example, React. React incorporates perfectly with your iOS and your Android devices, so the graphics are going to look like one-to-one. And the only other major drawback to your hybrid apps is that it requires an amount of familiarity with the framework you're using. So in the App Academy, we are learning how to use React, right? React it primarily uses JavaScript. So if you are a proficient JavaScript developer, you're going to be able to get started with React very easily. But it isn't just writing code in JavaScript entirely. The framework itself has requirements, has unique syntaxes, has ways of, it requires you to write your code in a certain way that it can translate into a format that the OS that you're deploying to can understand. So you have to do a little bit of work just to familiarize yourself with how things need to be done with the framework you're using. And once you have that sorted, you are in business. So there is a learning curve, even if you are familiar with the language of the framework, but compared to now having to learn two different languages and master two completely separate development environments, it's much easier. So now that you have that in mind, right, the three different types of apps that you can develop, you are equipped to decide which of these you need to choose for your app. If you need if you're developing an app that has a high amount of processing power requirements and it needs a tight integration with the operating system, a native app is going to be your best bet. For most other types of apps that need a moderate amount of integration, but that just need a native look and feel, there's no reason to overlook hybrid apps. And on the other hand, if it's an extremely lightweight app you need quick development turnaround times. It's either a prototype or just an app you're throwing together for a certain organization that requires a small little lightweight app. A web app might be all that they need. So there's no need to go and incorporate all of the APIs of the framework and go through all of that trouble when you can throw something together with a mobile web app. So that decision is entirely up to you. So once you've decided which of those is right for you, it's time to move on to more business decisions. Now remember, an app is a business, especially if you're doing it as an entrepreneur, for that app to be a source of revenue and income for you, right? You have to think about it as a business. Now, we've been in the app development industry for a long time, and after that, we were into the education industry, where we taught hundreds of individuals how to develop apps, right? And where the majority of them go wrong is they don't think about it as a business. So they end up developing an app, they put it out, and it doesn't really go anywhere. It sits on the App Store. They eventually end up bringing it down because there's just no one using it. It's not going anywhere. It's not generating any revenue. They've just wasted a bunch of time and effort and sometimes money on those developments. So there are decisions that you can make beforehand that's going to increase your chances of success, and it's going to get you thinking in the right way. So the first thing that I would suggest you think about, especially as South African or African developers, is don't try to go beyond your own continent, right? I mean, it's very appealing to look at and very exciting to look at your big international apps like your Instagrams or Ubers or whatever it is, right? And yes, there's a huge market internationally for those kinds of apps, but there is also a huge market on the African continent for apps, right? So a survey that was done, a study that was done a few years ago, the stat has probably gone up since then, revealed that Africa had a 67% mobile phone penetration rate, meaning 67% of the population, which is roughly 2 billion people, have access to mobile phones. Now that 2 billion is your potential market. So consider that when you get into app development, when you want to think about what kind of apps you can develop to solve people's problems. Don't go beyond your own continent first. And I highly suggest that every single developer in Africa should first consider the African continent, because it's a very unique place. It has unique problems and challenges, and it needs unique solutions. And who better to develop than those solutions than your African citizens. Now, with that, there are 6 steps that you can follow to ensure that your apps have the greatest chance of success. If you follow these 3 steps, you consider them before you even start conceptualizing your apps, it's really going to put you into a big space. And when you look at and you analyze apps that have made it versus apps that haven't made it in the world, it usually comes down to one of these 6 steps. 1 or 2 of these they didn't acknowledge, they didn't address, and that's why the app didn't take off. So the first and most important, this is, if there's one point that you come out with from this segment of the lecture, it's this: solve a problem. Right? Don't develop for the sake of developing or because you think the feature is kind of interesting or cool. Your app needs to solve a problem, right? You need to look around you, identify a problem that you yourself are having, or people in your community, people in your country are having, and develop a solution for that, right? People buy into solutions. They don't buy into apps just for fun. Maybe in the early days of mobile apps, when smartphones just came about, that was a thing, right? But today, your app is only going to get as much attention as compared to the size of the problem it is solving. And like I mentioned, Africa has a huge amount of challenges and problems that need solutions. An example of that is this app called iCow. So this app was developed by a Kenyan organization. So Kenya has a huge community of subsistence farmers that raise cattle, but they also do crops of all sorts. Now, anyone who's been into agriculture knows that it's not a simple field. It's very complicated. I mean, you got to go to university and you can get degrees in agriculture. But poor farmers in the rural landscapes of Kenya don't have the luxury to go and study for 4 or 5 years at a university to get that degree. So a group of developers in Kenya realized that, and they saw an opportunity, right? They saw a problem and they came up with an opportunity or with a solution, which was iCow. iCow is a training app almost for farmers in rural areas of Kenya. It gives them insights and information relevant to them, and it also has live updates. So if there is a pandemic going around with the cattle in a certain area, they will get an update about that, and they will know they'll get information on how to address it, right? So this is a very unique problem that Kenya had, and these developers, they found a solution, they designed it, they developed it, and it has huge scale adoption, not just in Kenya, but across several African countries now. And they've managed to grow as a business. Their app has multiple new features compared to when it first launched. Point number 2, reinvent the wheel. Right? That's not a typo, and I know that it runs contrary to what you've been told. Don't reinvent the wheel. But in terms of app development, if you've thought of an idea, chances are someone has thought about it already. And just because someone else is doing something doesn't mean there's no room for anyone else. What you instead need to focus on is coming with a unique value proposition, a unique way of addressing people's problems. An example of that is another Kenyan company known as Sendi, right? Sendi is basically a clone of Uber. It works in the exact same way. There's an app, you call a vehicle, you pay upfront, a vehicle comes, you give them your goods and they take it to where you need it to be. It does the exact same thing as Uber. It's very, very similar, but what made Sendi so successful was that it addressed a unique problem, right? So in Kenya, in the capital city, especially Nairobi, it's one of the most congested cities in the world in terms of traffic. And so to get from one block to another, even though it's, not that far, it's just 2 or 3 kilometers, sometimes it can take a really, really long time. And so that's what Sendi came to do. Sendi primarily hired small bikes. So if you needed to send a parcel over to the other side of the city, you call someone via Sendi, they'll come, they'll pick up your product, and they'll take it directly to where you need to be. And because of the way bikes can maneuver around traffic, it cut the travel time down significantly. And that's why Sendi became so popular. Although Uber was around, it didn't address people's specific problems. But Sendi, because it was developed by people from Kenya, addressed their problems more directly. Point number 3, target your market. When you get into development, when you're developing an app, you need to have a very good picture of who this app is intended for. Far too many people make the mistake of trying to develop an app for everyone, that everyone is going to use. It's not going to work out like that. And if you try to target everyone, you're going to end up targeting no one. So you need to be specific on who you are targeting. And an example that I can give you is the Facebook, as it was previously known. This might look somewhat familiar to you. Yes, it is the same Facebook, right? Today it's known as just Facebook, but when it first launched, it was the Facebook. And it was born out of a need that the founder, Mark Zuckerberg, had. So he was a nerd, right, in college. He had trouble making friends, and specifically he had trouble talking to girls, talking to women. And so in a very stereotypical nerd fashion, he decided the best way to address this was to develop this app, or this website back then, is what it was. And on this website, he's going to create a profile for himself, and he's going to list some of his details as well as some interesting facts about him. He's going to have a picture of himself, and he can then send that around to people, and they will be able to come and view his profile and maybe make some connections after that. Some of his friends saw this and they thought that that was a good idea, and they wanted profiles too, right? Because they had the exact same problem. So he developed an ability for them to add their own profiles, and from there it grew and grew and grew, and the rest is history. So first point, it addressed a certain problem, but more importantly, why I brought the Facebook in here was that Mark Zuckerberg knew exactly who his target audience was. It was himself and others like him, university students who had trouble making friends. And although now Facebook has grown into something far, far beyond that, the initial adoption was those guys, and that's what allowed it to grow into what it was today. Today, sure, there's something for everyone on Facebook, but if it started off like that, it probably wouldn't have gotten very far at all. It would have had a little limping start and would have collapsed. Point number 4, go to market yesterday, right? Now, this is especially meant for you perfectionists out there, like myself, right? When you're working on something that you're so passionate about, it's never going to be perfect to your eyes. So stop trying to make it perfect to your eyes and make it perfect to the audience, right? In fact, it doesn't even have to be perfect to your audience before you go to market. What you do is you develop a minimum viable product and you put that out there. And from there, you can then go and develop and make changes, because the changes you might think are necessary could turn out to be completely wrong. There's no better feedback in terms of what new features or what you should do differently than user feedback, right? An example for this is this little guy, right? Most of you probably are familiar with him, although it was a long time ago, so you probably forgot. But this is Flappy Bird, right? And it's probably still today one of the most popular games on mobile apps ever, right? It completely exploded and became world famous. Flappy Birds, believe it or not, was developed in 2 days by one guy, right? And when you look at the Flappy Bird app, it's not a very good app. I think about it from a technical perspective. It's very fun and entertaining, and that's why it was successful. But in terms of the specifications, it's very, very simple, right? A lot of people who develop something like this might think it's too simple to put out there. But the guy who developed it, he didn't have that notion, and he put it out there, and Flappy Bird became what it became. In fact, at its peak, Flappy Bird was earning $50,000 a day in ad revenue. Think about that number, right? With today's exchange rate, that's just under R1,000,000 a day from ad revenue, not even purchasers or sales, just ad revenue, right? And that wouldn't have happened for the developer if he thought that this app wasn't good enough to release and left it on his computer. But he put it out there, and the rest is history. So even if you don't think that your app is good enough, others out there might disagree with you, right? And that is ultimately who you are developing your app for. So put your fears aside, stop procrastinating, stop hesitating, and get your app out there as fast as possible. Point number 5, think money early, especially if you're getting into this as an entrepreneur developer. Don't reach to the point where your app is done and now you got to think about how we can make money off of this, right? Yes, it's good to do things for the passion, but ultimately revenue is what's going to allow you to grow and keep your app and sustain that app of yours. So think money early rather than later. And the final point, do it yourself as far as you can, right? There's too many scary stories of someone hiring a foreign developer or a foreign development firm to build this app for them, and there's a number of terrible scenarios that happen. A, they get the app, but it's full with bugs, it's only half complete, the developer disappears with the money that was paid over, and you can't get in touch with anyone on that side. And the thing is though, we've been approached by a number of people like this, but the quality of code is so bad that nobody wants to touch it. You will not be able to find a local developer in a hurry to touch some of the code that comes from some of these firms. So you can avoid this by doing it yourself. The other risks of getting a foreign firm to develop or some other company to develop your app for you is that they could steal your idea. That has happened before. And they also are just going to be doing it to do a job, right? They're not going to have that same passion. So they're not going to put the same amount of effort into it. Right? You could give them your full specifications, but they'll never be able to bring your vision to life as much, as well as you would be able to do it. It's like Da Vinci with the Mona Lisa, right? It took him 4 years, but he didn't outsource it. He did it himself. Until today, it's a testament to him as the artist to put it together. And just like that, your apps are a work of art from you. So as far as you can, do it yourself, right? Today, with AI tools to help you with coding, to help you with asset creation or conceptualization, it's easier than ever. And if you still can't do it yourself, you're better off partnering with someone who can take some of the load off of you, right? Don't hire, partner. If you hire someone, of course, there's upfront costs, but again, with an employee, they're not going to have that same vision and passion as you. They're going to be doing it as a job. So it may sound scary taking on a partner and signing away a % of your company, but as someone once told me, you'd rather be 50% owner of a 10 million rand company than be 100% owner of nothing, of an app that's just some code on your computer, right? So do it yourself as far as possible. Now, very quickly, let's go through some examples of successful apps who have. We'll go through these 6 steps, and we can observe how each of them has addressed each of these points. Up first, everyone knows this one: Instagram, multi-billion-dollar company, one of the most popular apps and social media platforms out there. In fact, if you are watching this and you have a smartphone, I can almost guarantee that you have Instagram on there. That's just how widespread it was. But it didn't start off like that, right? It had very, very humble beginnings. So let's look at these 6 points, right? Number 1, did Instagram solve a problem? Yes, you might not think about it as a very significant problem, but it's a vanity problem. It's a social problem. People like to share what they're up to. People like to share pictures and videos of themselves. You go out with your friends, you want to snap a selfie, you go to a restaurant, order a nice expensive meal. People want to share that, right? It might not be a problem in the typical sense, but it's something that this app addressed. Number 2, reinvent the wheel. Believe it or not, Instagram was not the first of its kind. There were a number of social media already around at that time, and they were specifically social medias for sharing images. Instagram just came with a unique way of doing it that was more appealing, right, to their target market, which is point number 3. Instagram knew who they were trying to target, right? Which is young individuals who like to socialize and share things with their friends, right? So till today, if you look at the Instagram page on the App Store, look at the type of pictures that they choose, right? Although again, Instagram has grown huge, and now you've got celebrities and you've got brands and you've got companies, big and small, that have Instagram accounts. That wasn't the original audience that Instagram tried to attract. It was this small group of young individuals who liked to share pictures with their friends and with the world, the selfie culture. And the way that Instagram attracted them was so successful that it became so popular, and then all of these other apps, or all of these other accounts came about, right? Go to market yesterday, point number 4. Instagram had a short development window, and then it went live, right? I believe development was around the 2010s, the early 2010, and then by October of 2010, it went live. And it wasn't anything that you see today. The logo was different, the look and feel of the app was completely different. Most of the features you're familiar with the app today, like Reels or group chats or stories, didn't exist, right? It was very bare bones. In fact, when Instagram first released, it wasn't even available on Android. It was exclusively iOS, right, for Apple devices. But they put it out there, they saw the demand for it, and the revenue that they made allowed them to grow it and develop it into what it is today. Point number 5, think money early. Well, advertising was always built into the DNA of Instagram. Fortunately, there were other social media platforms out there, so they knew the model that they were going with. If we get 100,000 users, we can pay good money, or companies would pay good money to advertise to those people. So that was always in the DNA of Instagram. And do it yourself. Today, it's owned by Meta, which is a company that owns Facebook, and there's teams of hundreds of people probably that work on Instagram. But initially, it was developed by two people, two friends who got together, who had this idea, and they put out this app. Next case study we'll look at is Uber, right? And again, point number one, solve a problem. Uber solved a very big problem, which was call in a ride. In fact, the founder of Uber and the first developer of Uber got the idea when he was having trouble hailing a taxi in Paris. This was in, I think, 2009 or 2010. And so, you know, he's running up and down the streets. You know, in some cities, the way you hail a cab, you walk to the edge of the road and you put your hand up and you hope that someone stops by you. So he's running up and down the road and nobody's stopping. He's having trouble. And so he thinks to himself, there has to be a better way of doing this. And so the idea of Uber was born. Reinvent the wheel. Again, Uber wasn't the first of its kind. There was an app called Sidecar that was around, but it didn't have the same kind of appeal. Uber just came, did it better, and today you don't even know what Sidecar is, right? Uber is Uber has dominated that industry. Target your market. Again, because of the developer's own experience, because he was developing a solution for himself, he knew exactly who to target it. It was individuals in big cities who had trouble hailing taxis. When Uber first came out, it wasn't, and this is point number 4, go to market yesterday, right? It kind of bleeds into this one. When Uber first came out, it wasn't a global app, right? It targeted specific cities, big cities in North America and Europe that had this kind of problem, right? And that's where it stayed for a while. And then eventually it grew and became a global company. And now it's almost every country in the world has Uber. But that's not how it started off. That's not what they intended. They built it small and they went to market. And based on the feedback and the kind of users they were getting, they managed to develop it further and make it what it is today. Think money early, pretty straightforward. You call a cab, you pay up front, and your cab comes. A percent goes to the driver and a percent goes to the company. So that was built into the very DNA of Uber as well. And do it yourself, again, 2 people developed Uber, the first version of Uber. Today, team has grown significantly, but it had very, very humble beginnings in that sense. The final example I want to use is Xander, which is an education app company that IT Varsity owns. And we have about 70,000 apps that are used across South Africa. And I like using this example because it hits very, very close to home. It's not some huge organization internationally that developed it. It's the small little group in South Africa that did it. Point number 1, does it solve a problem? Yes, it's providing educational apps for kids, whether they're learning maths or languages or social skills. There's an app for them. Reinvent the wheel? It's not the first of its kind. There's hundreds probably of these types of apps and websites, these education apps. But the unique thing about Xander was that it was specific to South Africa and the South African educational curriculum. So that's why it had a unique appeal. Target your market? Well, obviously it's kids apps, so we targeted parents and schools, especially those with younger kids. And we got them to buy into it for their kids. Go to market yesterday. Although there's 70 apps in the catalog that cover several of South Africa's national languages and several of the subjects required for schools, we didn't develop all of those at once. As the apps came about, we put them out there. And based on the feedback that we got from users, we knew what direction to take the next apps. So as they came up, we put them out. And do it yourself. Okay, so this one, not necessarily, but it was a very, very small team that developed this, completely local in the same city as the founders. And that way, there was a very close relationship with the developers. And today, the maintenance team is made out of 2 people, right? Who again are based locally. Now, the final topic, right? The money question. Very quickly, right? This is a whole topic, right? How to turn an app into a successful business, right? With the above guidelines that we spoke about, those will give you an idea on how to develop a successful app that is meant for people, that is developed to address a certain problem, and you know whose problem you are solving, you know how to target them. That's all well and good, right? But you still need a way of making revenue out of that, because you've already developed the app, you know who it's going to go out to, but how can you monetize that? This is a whole topic that we can probably go another hour-long lecture about, but very, very quickly, I'm going to walk you through 4 of the primary ways that apps can earn revenue. And these are your straight up paid apps. You have freemium apps, you have in-app purchases within your apps, and the most commonly used, I think, today is advertising, right? So very quickly, what do each of these mean? Paid apps, very simple, means your app is not free to download. There is a price attached to it. Someone has to buy it to use it. This is a good source of revenue, but it is very difficult to achieve because it generally means that you're going to have a bit of a brand, and your app has to be 10 out of 10, professionally made. Because you need to convince people to take out their card, take out their money, and buy your app, right? So generally big brands go this way. For example, Procreate, which is an illustration app for iPad. It's a very, very good quality app, so they have a right to charge the fee that they do, and there's no free version of it. So that is paid apps. The second second type of way to earn revenue from apps is your freemium apps, which are free up until a certain point. You can download the app for free, but some features are locked. And if you want to unlock the rest of those features, you have to pay for it. This is nice because it gives people a way to trial your app, to try it out. And while they are trying it out, you then have the opportunity to woo them, to impress them, to convince them that your app is worth it, and they will then gladly take out their money and buy the rest of your app. The third way is in-app purchases. This basically means that you have items within your app that are for sale. So a lot of games use this, where you can buy additional characters or additional currency within the game with real money. And so the app is free to download, it's free to access, to use, but if you want some of those additional items, you can then buy it. And finally, the most commonly used, in my opinion, is advertising, which is basically means you get paid by companies to show their adverts in your app. So if you develop a free app that's getting tens of thousands of views every month, so it has tens of thousands of views every month, it's going to be easy for you to then charge companies advertising revenue to host their ads on your within your app. And you don't even have to approach companies directly. Your companies like Facebook and Google and a number of other have that facility for you. So you just sign an agreement with them, and they will find the companies to advertise on your app, and you get a revenue share from that. And advertising is not to be overlooked as a viable means of income from your app. Again, you can bring up the example of Flappy Birds, right? One guy, 2 days, yet he was making $50,000 a day just from that app, from advertising. And you look at other companies, or other social medias rather, like Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, their primary source of income is advertising. So advertising is huge. And you'll notice as well that many apps use 2 or more of these. So they'll have advertising, they'll also have in-app purchases, or they'll have a freemium with in-app purchases and advertising. It's a combination. They use 2 or more, and that maximizes the revenue streams from your apps. So those are some things that you need to consider before you even start developing your app. Go through this list, right? First, you decide whether you're going native, web app, or hybrid approach. Then go through that checklist, right? Who you're developing the app for, solve a problem. What sort of problem are you solving? Who is your target market? What are you going to do in terms of earning money and earning revenue from that app? Ask yourself these questions. Make sure you have the answers, and that's going to give you the direction that you need to go in when you start developing your app. Don't go in blind. Have these decisions made beforehand, and I guarantee it's going to make your development journey a lot clearer, and it's going to greatly increase your chances of success when you finally put your app out there. Right, yeah, that's about it.
Beautiful stuff, Talaha. Thank you so much for stepping into studio and sharing some of those nuggets on how to utilize strategies on building that winning app. I hope all of you developers found the lesson with Talaha informative. That's it for today's session. Please don't forget to hashtag FNB Academy. Remain active on our social media platforms. Remain active on WhatsApp. And also utilize the learning management system for any updates that will be sent out to all of you guys. Listen, I'm really excited to be part of the FNB App Academy 2025. This is where we make magic happen. I am your host, Karabo Mohole. Really excited but sad that today has to end. But we also have more in store for the next episode. Cannot wait to see all of you guys there. Peace.
you.